the elected city clerk in the city of Glendale in 2004, in 2005, and he got re-elected in 2009. At the age of 28, he was one of the youngest elected officials in the country of Armenian descent. As city clerk, ARDASHES oversees the preparation and distribution of council agendas and reports, runs citywide elections, issues various permits and licenses, and manages the city's public records. ARDY has worked with local and state campaigns as well in governmental affairs and a public relations firm. Immediately prior to his election, he served as a government relations and executive director for ANC Western Region offices. He's a public advocate, and he's here to share with you his stories and on advanced organizational leadership. So help me welcoming ARDASHES.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for having me. My name is ARDASHES, but most of you probably know me as ARDY. The funny thing about that is most of my life, actually, I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and I've lived in Glendale since about 1986, and my entire life I made everyone call me ARDASHES. And even through high school, in fact, I still have some Anglo friends who will see me and they'll say, hey, ARDASHES. and that's how I know how long people have known me. And I only started going by ARDY, ironically, when I started working for the Armenian National Committee. You say, well, why is that? You're working for an Armenian organization. When you have only 15 minutes with a member of the Department of State or the House of Representatives or the Senate, and you have to explain to them where ARDSOF is, what ARDSOF is, and why it needs the U.S. support, you don't want to spend 5 minutes of that 15 minutes explaining to them the proper pronunciation of ARDASHES. So, hence, I'm here before you as ARDY KASSAKHIAN from Glendale, California. And I have to say this is really humbling because I'm here to talk about leadership to people who I look at as leaders. I'm serious. I mean, we have people who were featured in Yerevan magazine recently as reporters and journalists, and you have doctors and lawyers and business people and people in the entertainment industry who I've known for many years. So, I don't know what makes me particularly unique to be able to speak about this. So I want to actually have a conversation with a really proven leader. But I was going to invite President Obama up here, but I see the chair is actually sitting empty in the back over there and have a conversation with him. And someone actually already stole that idea, and apparently it didn't go very well. So instead, I'm going to try to impart upon you some nuggets of wisdom that I've acquired in my journeys and my journeys that are still ongoing in the realm of political leadership. First, let me thank the organizers of this event. I think between all the organizations, you have a tremendous incubator of leadership. I want to specifically thank, of course, Armand Al-Khanian, who has been instrumental in putting this together and seeing the vision and wanting to see it come to fruition. Of course, the Homeland and ARDY chapter. I can't think of, with all due respect to my former employer, the ANC, I can't think of a single organization other than the Homeland and ARDY chapter that has been such a successful incubator, nurturer of leaders. I was never a Yethbuyer. I was not a brother. I did not grow up in the scouting ranks. But throughout my life, all my friends who have achieved great things were people that had been in Homeland and had been specifically in the ARDY chapter, in ARDY Chors, or this, that, or whatever. I mean, I know all the names. I was never even a part of it, and it's because of that institutional training that you do that's so important, from the scouts to the sports, and so I commend you for that. And also the ANC, of course, which does tremendous work in terms of political leadership for the Armenian American community. By the way, Maria, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. I've looked up to Maria for many years. She was at the forefront of many of the political struggles as the Armenian community was starting to mature. In terms of electoral power and vote. And you mentioned something where there was a question asked about the ceiling or the role of women. It's interesting that I read a statistic the other day that the people voting in this November's election have only known a female Secretary of State in the United States. Think about that. That's really interesting. I mean, I remember Secretary of State Baker. I even remember Secretary of State Schultz. But other than Colin Powell, who was there for a brief period of time, the Secretary of State of this country has always been a woman. So, things are changing. And I also remember once when I was watching the elections and the campaign, and Hillary Clinton was on the cusp of potentially becoming the nominee of the Democratic Party. My aunt, who was here from Lebanon, we were having a discussion. I said, isn't it great that, look, you almost have, this woman could be the nominee for president. Doesn't it really mean that women have reached equality here in the United States? And she looked at me shaking her head and said, ARDASHES, until this country elects a woman who has no clue about foreign policy, came only from a privileged background, was born on third base but thought she hit a triple, then you'll have reached equality. And, you make a really good point. Of course, alluding to, in Glendale, we have 5 city council members. How many of you live in Glendale, actually? How many of you, keep your hands up, how many of you actually watch city council meetings on GTV6? I'm surprised. Most of the time, I run into some real hardcore addicts of reality political television. I call our city council meeting City Council Survivor, unfortunately. We don't get to vote anyone off the island. So we have 5 council members. Some of you are aware of it. Some of you, will approach me in public and ask me how the hat lady's doing or her mother's doing. And our city council members run alternately every 2 years in April of odd number years. So in April 2013, we're going to have 3 of the 5 council council seats up for election. And in April of 2015, the other 2 will be up for election. Now, some here are familiar with this process because in the last decade, Armenians have really embraced this process. Some will say almost too aggressively and to the detriment of the advancement of the community. Sorry, I just got the 2-minute warning. Are you sure that wasn't held upside down? Are you sure you didn't need 5 minutes? No? 2 minutes, all right. Okay, so Armenians have politically matured recently, and this has caused more involvement. In fact, most recently, I remember Kim Kardashian. I'll say the Kim Kardashian story, even though I have seen it. So some of you may have heard Kim Kardashian. She's a reality show star or whatever. She announced that she wanted to be mayor of Glendale. And the assumption was that you run for mayor in Glendale, but you really don't. The mayor actually is an appointed position out of the 5 council members. So the 5 council members decide amongst themselves who will be mayor for 1 year afterwards. Okay, so technically, she couldn't run for mayor. No one can run for mayor. If you want to be mayor, you have to run for city council. But in actuality, the mayor or the city council isn't even the person who runs the city. The city's leadership is vested in the position of city manager. Now, the city manager, city council model is based on the corporate model, where the board of directors is the city council, and the CEO is the city manager. And underneath the city manager, and I had a fancy chart that the PowerPoint did not work on, there is fire department, police department, utilities, public works, housing, economic development. The only 2 departments that are not a part of it are the 2 other elected seats besides council, which are city clerk and city treasurer. Now, the reason why it's important for us to understand this in terms of complex or advanced organizational leadership is that when we think of Armenian leaders, we're always pushing Armenians to run for elected office, right? We want more Armenians involved in the political process, and by that, we only see it through the paradigm of city council. There's 2 seats, 8 of us have to run for it. Because who's he? Okay, so. The reality of it. I will stop as soon as I'm done with this thought. The reality of it is that we do not have enough young Armenians in the ranks of the organization to be city managers one day. It's very scant and very few. And that's because our priorities have been shifting. So, as much as we encourage young Armenian Americans to be involved in politics, we should also need to encourage them to be involved in public service, and through public service to study leadership and organization. organizational management, so we can have Armenian American more police chiefs, fire chiefs, directors of economic development, and eventually have city managers. Because it's through those positions that you can truly affect change within an organization, and think about on your daily basis how often you interact with a council member as opposed to how often you interact with a various member of city staff. So, my time has already stopped apparently, so I'm not going to go on. I do want to say that I will leave it open to some questions if there are any. And I will say that there are a couple of books that I have enjoyed reading about leadership and general study of it. And we can talk about politics during the break. I'll be here still for a while. One is a book called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. If you haven't read Malcolm Gladwell, he's great. He writes for the New Yorker. And The Tipping Point identifies how epidemics occur, epidemics or social trends occur in a good way. And it identifies 3 types of people. And I think the key to success in any organization, whether it's a political campaign or you're putting together a television program or you're running a successful business like Mr. Melkonian, is you identify the people who are good at these particular roles and bring them together at one place and at one time. The other book is by, if you're interested in politics and political leadership, Chris Matthews has an excellent book called Hardball. Whenever I run into young Armenian Americans interested in politics, I have a stack of them in my office. I hand it to them. I say, read this, read it again, and then after you've absorbed it, come back to it after a couple of years and read it again. So those are 2 books I would recommend that everyone reads. And I want to thank Woodbury University. I want to thank Home and ARDA. I want to thank the ANCPN I saw outside and all the other organizers of this event and the distinguished panelists with whom I'm sharing the stage. Thank you very much for
Thank you. We want to recognize Ardy with a certificate of recognition. And I think Ardy was delighted that Kim decided not to run for city clerk. Okay, there we go. Before we take a break, we have another special dignitary here. Give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. 1 second. I'm going to use the private entrance.